Friends, today we'll be talking about international trade theory and we'll be discussing absolute, equal and comparative cost differences. International trade means trade between nations. According to Olin, international trade is a special case of inter-regional trade. No countries can produce all the goods and services that it requires. Countries import goods and services which are not available with them and export goods and services which are in excess quantities. The need for international trade arises due to uneven distribution of natural as well as human resources. International trade increases employment and competition, which leads to economic growth. It also increases the welfare of consumers. Consumers can buy the commodities which nation cannot produce at home. Let's first understand why do we need to trade. The first and foremost reason for international trade is that human wants are unlimited. One nation cannot produce everything that it demands. Nation has to depend on other nations. Secondly, the quality of factors of production, that is land, labor, capital and entrepreneur, is also different in different nations. Third, natural resources are also unevenly distributed among various nations. The fourth reason could be the technological development in different countries are different. Fifth reason is that international trade is a result of division of labor and specialization. The division of labor in each country is also different. Let's discuss the first topic, absolute cost differences. The concept of absolute cost differences was first given by Adam Smith, the father of economics, in his very famous book, An Inquiry into the Nature and the Causes of the Wealth of the Nations, which was published almost 250 years from now in the year 1776. According to Smith, the main reason for international trade is division of labor. Due to division of labor, each country has advantage of producing a particular commodity. Let's understand the concept of absolute cost differences with the help of an example. We assume that there are two countries, X and Y, and then there are two commodities also, A and B. Both countries can produce both the commodities. The production of both commodities is done with 8 hours of labor work, which is depicted in the table. Country X can produce 40 units of commodity A and 20 units of commodity B with 8 hours of labor work. Country Y can produce 20 units of commodity A and 40 units of commodity B with 8 hours of labor work. It means that country X has the absolute advantage in the production of commodity A and country Y has absolute advantage in production of commodity B. Therefore, country X produces commodity A and exports it to country Y, and country Y produces commodity B and exports it to country X. It means that country X specializes in production of A and country Y specializes in production of B. Some countries have more natural resources than other countries, and therefore some countries have the advantage in the production of some particular commodities. Now let's see what will be the domestic exchange rate. In country X, 40 units of product A is equivalent to 20 units of product B. Therefore, in country X, 1 unit of product A is equivalent to 0.5 unit of product B. It explains that country X will enter into international trade if it gets more than 0.5 units of product B for just 1 unit of product A. And what happens in the country Y? In country Y, 20 units of product A is equivalent to 40 units of product B. Therefore, in country Y, 1 unit of product A will be equivalent to 2 units of product B. Country Y will enter into international trade if it gives up less than 2 units of product B for 1 unit of product A. Therefore, the international exchange rate is higher than 1 unit of product A equivalent to 0.5 unit of product B and less than 1 unit of product A equivalent to 2 units of product B. We can say that country X can produce commodity A at lower cost and country Y can produce commodity B at lower cost. Thus, in this situation, international trade is mutually beneficial. Let's talk about the second topic, which is equal cost differences. If equal cost differences exist, international trade will not take place. The trade is not beneficial to any country in this situation. The equal cost differences can be easily explained with the help of a table. We again assume that there are two countries X and Y and there are two commodities A and B. Both nations can produce both commodities. Country X can produce 40 units of product A and 40 units of product B with 8 hours of labor work. Country Y can produce 20 units of product A and 20 units of product B with 8 hours of labor work. Country X produces A and B both at lower cost than country Y, and country Y produces A and B both at higher cost than country X. Domestic exchange rate in country X will be 40 units of commodity A equivalent to 40 units of commodity B. Therefore, in country X, 1 unit of commodity A will be equivalent to 1 unit of commodity B. It explains that country X will enter the international trade only if it gets more than 1 unit of commodity B for 1 unit of commodity A. In country Y, 20 units of commodity A is equivalent to 20 units of commodity B. Therefore, in country Y, 1 unit of commodity A is equivalent to 1 unit of commodity B. Country Y is ready to give up less than 1 unit of commodity B for 1 unit of commodity A. Country X will not accept less than 1 unit of B for 1 unit of A, and country Y is not ready to give more than 1 unit of commodity B for 1 unit of commodity A. In this situation, trade between two countries is not possible and neither it is beneficial. No nation will gain by international trade and specialization because one country produces both the commodities at lower cost than the other country. Country X is equally efficient in production of both commodities than country Y. Friends, let's talk about another concept called comparative cost differences. This theory was propounded by David Ricardo in the year 1817 in his very popular book Principles of Political Economy and Taxation. This theory is also known as classical theory of international trade. According to David Ricardo, if comparative cost differences exist between two nations, then international trade is beneficial for both the nations. If all the nations have same source of production and equally developed, then international trade will not take place. All nations have different natural resources, different human resources and different physical resources, and therefore there is difference in the cost of production for all the commodities. According to David Ricardo, the production cost of both the commodities in one nation is lower than the other nation, which means that one nation has the absolute advantage in production of both commodities, but one nation has the comparative advantage in production of one commodity than another commodity at home. Therefore, the nation has the comparative advantage in production of that commodity. According to Ricardo, country produces the commodity in which it has either more comparative advantage or less comparative disadvantage. Let's talk about the assumptions of the theory. The very first assumption of the theory is that it is 2 by 2 model. That is, it is 2 commodity, 2 nation model. We assume in this theory that there are 2 countries and 2 commodities. Countries X and Y and commodity A and B. The second assumption of the theory is about perfect competition. We assume in this theory that there is perfect competition in the market, which means that product is homogeneous and there are large number of buyers and large number of sellers in the market. The third assumption of the theory is mobility of factors of production. We assume that all the factors of production are completely mobile within the nation but completely immobile between the two nations. The fourth assumption of the theory is about production cost. We assume that production cost is considered as labor cost and there is only one factor of production, that is labor. How many labor hours are used in the production of a commodity is very important. The fifth assumption of the theory is about constant costs. It is assumed that production will take place only under constant cost condition. It means that output level cannot affect the cost of production. The sixth assumption of the theory is about transportation cost. This theory assumes that there are no transportation charges. This is impractical, but theory assumes because transportation cost affects the prices of the commodity. The seventh assumption of the theory is about no trade restrictions. The international trade is not restricted by tariffs and other instruments. The international trade is free from all the barriers. The eighth assumption is about the size of the nation. Both the nations are of equal size. It means that there is no huge differences between two nations regarding their respective natural resources. The ninth assumption of the theory is about taste of the consumers. We assume that there is no differences in the taste of consumers in both the countries. And last, the 10th assumption of the theory is about the trade cycles. We assume that there are no trade cycles in both the nations and economy of both the nation is absolutely stable. Let's talk about the theory. David Ricardo takes into consideration only the real cost, not the monetary cost. Ricardo measures cost in terms of labor hours. We can explain the theory of comparative cost differences with the help of a table. Let's assume that there are two nations, X and Y, and there are two commodities, commodity A and commodity B. Country X requires 80 hours of labor work to produce 1 unit of commodity A and 90 hours of labor work to produce 1 unit of commodity B. Country Y requires 120 hours of labor work to produce 1 unit of commodity X and 100 hours of labor work to produce 1 unit of commodity B. Country X produces A and B at lower cost than country Y. Country X has an absolute advantage in production of both the commodities, but country X produces A at a lower cost than B at home. Therefore, country X has comparative advantage in production of commodity A. Country X produces commodity A and exports to country Y. Now let's talk about country Y. Country Y produces A and B at higher cost than country X. Country Y has an absolute disadvantage in production of both commodities. But country Y produces B at lower cost than A at home. Therefore, country Y has the less comparative disadvantage in production of commodity B. Country Y produces commodity B and exports to country X. Let's talk about the cost ratio. The cost ratio can be easily explained with the help of a table. Let's talk about the cost ratio in country X. The cost ratio of commodity A is equal to 0.67 and the cost ratio of commodity B is equivalent to 0.90. The cost ratio of A is less than the cost ratio of B. Country X produces commodity A because production cost of commodity A is lower than the production cost of commodity B in country X. Therefore, country X specializes in production of commodity A. Let's talk about country Y. The cost ratio of commodity A is equal to 1.50 and the cost ratio of commodity B is equal to 1.10. The cost ratio of commodity B is less than the cost ratio of commodity A. Country Y produces commodity B because production cost of commodity B is lower than the production cost of commodity A in country Y. Therefore, country Y specializes in production of commodity B. In general, the country produces that commodity in which the cost ratio is lower because it is either more advantageous or less disadvantageous for the country. Let's talk about domestic exchange rate. International trade will take place if it is beneficial to both the countries. The domestic exchange rate is depicted in the table. Let's talk about country X. In country X, 1 unit of commodity A is equivalent to 0.89 unit of commodity B. Country X has to give up 1 unit of commodity A to produce 0.89 units of commodity B. Country X will trade if it gets more than 0.89 units of commodity B for 1 unit of commodity A. Let me talk about country Y. In country Y, 1 unit of commodity A is equivalent to 1.2 units of commodity B. Country Y has to give up 1.2 units of commodity B to produce 1 unit of commodity A. Country Y will trade if it gives up less than 1.2 units of commodity B for 1 unit of commodity A. Therefore, international exchange rate will be determined between 1 unit of commodity A equivalent to 0.89 units of commodity B and 1 unit of commodity A equivalent to 1.2 units of commodity B. Let's see how the countries will benefit. Suppose international exchange rate is 1 unit of commodity A equivalent to 1 unit of commodity B. Let's talk about country X first. Domestic exchange rate in country X is 1 unit of commodity A equivalent to 0.89 units of commodity B. If country X trades with country Y, it gets 1 unit of B for 1 unit of A. At home, country X gets 0.89 units of B for 1 unit of commodity A. Benefit of country X is 1 unit of B minus 0.89 units of B equivalent to 0.11 units of B. It means that firstly, country X can save 0.11 hours of labor work by entering into international trade. Secondly, country X can use this excess labor hours in production of commodity A to enhance the output of commodity A. Let me talk about country Y now. In country Y, domestic exchange rate is 1 unit of commodity A equivalent to 1.2 units of commodity B. If country Y trades with country X, if it gives up 1 unit of B for 1 unit of A. At home, country Y gives up 1.2 units of B for 1 unit of A. Benefits: 1.2 units of commodity B minus 1 unit of commodity B equivalent to 0.2 units of commodity B. It means that firstly, country Y can save 0.2 hours of labor work by entering into international trade. Secondly, country Y can use this excess labor hours in the production of commodity B to enhance the output of commodity B. Let me talk about the limitations of comparative cost differences theory. The first limitation of the theory is that the theory considers only two nations and two commodities. In practical world, more nations are involved in international trade with more than two commodities. The second limitation is that Ricardo measures cost in terms of labor hours. It is very difficult to measure the cost in labor hours because it is quite subjective. Normally, cost is measured in terms of money. The third limitation is that the theory assumes perfect competition. The assumption is also far away from reality. The fourth limitation of the theory is that the theory ignores the demand side. Ricardo considers only supply side to explain the theory. The fifth limitation of the theory is that the theory assumes the factors are mobile within country only. Factors cannot move from one nation to another nation. This assumption is again far away from reality. The sixth limitation of the theory is that Ricardo makes assumption of free trade. It means that there are no restrictions to international trade, but in real world, countries impose tariffs, quotas, etc. and create barriers to international trade. The last and the seventh limitation of the theory is that this theory explains complete specialization. It explains that one country produces only one commodity after having trade. This is not true in the real world. Friends, I would like to conclude this topic by summarizing what we have studied so far. There are mainly three types of cost differences which affect the international trade. In case of equal cost differences, trade will not occur. Absolute cost differences explain that one country has a natural advantage in production of one commodity and another country has the natural advantage in production of second commodity. This natural advantage arises due to the natural monopoly of natural resources. Ricardo's theory of comparative cost advantage is most popular and useful to understand the basic and fundamental reason of international trade. Thank you.